My wife screamed, "I wish I'd married Chris instead. At least he's a real man." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I was standing in our kitchen holding a stack of unpaid bills when Jennifer delivered what would become the death sentence of our marriage. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you perfect clarity. Instead of yelling back, instead of defending myself, I looked her straight in the eyes and said 5 words that changed everything. "Then why don't you call him?" What happened next? She actually did it. Right there in front of me, Jennifer pulled out her phone and called Christopher, her ex from college, the golden boy she'd been comparing me to for 3 years of marriage. The conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I know because I timed it. When she hung up, her face was white as paper. She locked herself in our bedroom and didn't come out for 6 hours. But that phone call? It was just the beginning of the most insane week of my life. Because, you see, Christopher had some very interesting things to tell my wife. Things about his real life, his real marriage, and most importantly, the restraining order he'd filed against someone who'd been stalking him for years. Someone whose description sounded awfully familiar. By the end of this story, Jennifer would lose her job, her family's respect, and discover that the perfect life she'd been obsessing over was built on lies she'd been telling herself. And me? I'd finally understand that sometimes the best thing that can happen to your marriage is watching it completely fall apart. This is the story of how one phone call exposed 3 years of deception and set me free. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before my world imploded. My name is Marcus. I'm 32 years old. And until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life. I was a high school history teacher at Lincoln High. Been there for 8 years. Not exactly rolling in money, but I loved what I did. There's something satisfying about watching a kid's face light up when they finally understand why the Civil War mattered. You know, I met Jennifer 5 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. She was this beautiful, confident nurse who laughed at my terrible jokes about historical figures. Jennifer was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, ambitious, and way out of my league. She had this energy about her, like she was always moving towards something bigger and better. I was completely smitten. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags during our engagement, but love makes you blind, doesn't it? Jennifer had this habit of bringing up her ex-boyfriend Christopher in conversations. Not in an obvious way. She was smarter than that. It was always subtle comparisons. Chris used to take me to this amazing restaurant downtown, she'd say when I suggested Olive Garden for date night. Or Chris always said I looked beautiful in blue when I complimented her red dress. At first, I thought it was normal. Everyone has a past, right? I figured she'd get over it once we were married. Christopher, or Chris as she always called him, was apparently this incredible guy from her college days. They dated for 3 years at State University. According to Jennifer, he was pre-med, came from money, drove a BMW, and treated her like a princess. The way she described him, Chris was basically perfect. Tall, handsome, ambitious, everything a woman could want. "Why did you two break up?" I asked once, early in our relationship. "He got into medical school in California," she said with this wistful look. "Long distance never works. We tried for a few months, but..." She shrugged, but I could see the pain in her eyes. I should have realized then that she'd never really gotten over him. We got married 3 years ago in a beautiful ceremony at St. Mary's Church. Jennifer looked stunning in her dress, and for a moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. But even on our wedding day, there were signs. During the reception, her college roommate Sarah made a toast that included the line, "Jennifer, you deserve all the happiness in the world, and I know Marcus will give you everything Chris couldn't." The room went quiet for a second. Jennifer's face turned red, and she quickly changed the subject. I brushed it off at the time, but that comment stuck with me. Our first year of marriage was actually pretty good. We bought a small house in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Jennifer worked at Mercy General Hospital, pulling long shifts but making good money. Between her salary and my teacher's income, we were comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. The problems started in year 2. Jennifer began getting restless. She'd scroll through social media for hours, looking at her college friends' lives. She started making comments about how everyone else was doing so much better than us. Bigger houses, nicer cars, exotic vacations. "Sarah just bought a house with a pool," she'd say, showing me Facebook photos. Her husband's a lawyer. "That's nice, honey," I'd reply, not really understanding where this was going. "Don't you want more for us, Marcus? Don't you want to give me nice things?" I did want to give her nice things. But on a teacher's salary, there were limits. I picked up summer school classes, tutored kids after hours, even drove for Uber on weekends. But it never seemed like enough. The Christopher references became more frequent in year 3. She'd accidentally bring him up during arguments about money or our future. Chris always said he'd buy his wife a house with a big kitchen, she'd mention, when our dishwasher broke and we couldn't immediately replace it. "Well, I'm not Chris," I'd say, trying to keep my voice light. "No," she'd reply quietly. "You're not." Those 3 words cut deeper each time she said them. I started noticing other things too. Jennifer would get secretive with her phone, taking it to the bathroom, keeping it face down during dinner. When I asked about it, she'd say it was just work stuff or drama with her nursing friends. I wanted to trust her, so I did. She also became obsessed with keeping up appearances. Designer handbags we couldn't afford, expensive makeup, clothes that cost more than my monthly car payment. When I'd express concern about our budget, she'd get defensive. I work hard, Marcus. I deserve nice things. Chris always understood that. There it was again. Chris, the ghost of relationships past, haunting our marriage. The real breaking point came 3 weeks ago when the school district announced budget cuts. 20 teachers were being laid off, and I was one of them. 8 years of service, excellent reviews, beloved by students, none of it mattered. Last hired, first fired. I came home that day devastated, expecting comfort from my wife. Instead, Jennifer looked at me like I'd personally disappointed her. "What are we going to do about the mortgage?" was the first thing she said. "I'll find another job," I assured her. "Maybe this is a chance to try something new." That's when her true feelings came out. The comparisons to Christopher became daily occurrences. How he would never let this happen. How he always had a plan. How he was successful and stable in everything I apparently wasn't. For 3 weeks, I endured this constant criticism while job hunting and trying to keep our marriage together. I thought if I could just find work, things would go back to normal. I was so incredibly wrong. Let me tell you about Christopher Mitchell, the man who haunted my marriage without even knowing it. According to Jennifer's carefully curated stories, Chris was basically Superman in scrubs, 6'2", dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could charm anyone. He came from old money. His father owned a chain of medical supply companies across the Midwest. Jennifer would describe their college relationship like it was something out of a romance novel. Chris would surprise me with weekend trips to Chicago, she'd say dreamily. He had this black BMW convertible, and we'd drive along Lakeshore Drive with the top down. Or he took me to his family's lake house every summer. It had its own private beach. But here's what I found interesting. Jennifer never had any photos from those magical times. I was so heartbroken after we broke up. I deleted everything, she'd explain whenever I asked. Too painful to look at. The more she talked about Chris, the more I realized she'd built him up into this mythical figure. In her version of events, he was pre-med at Northwestern, came from a family of doctors, and was destined for greatness. Their breakup wasn't because of incompatibility or normal relationship issues. It was purely circumstantial. If only he hadn't gotten into Stanford Medical School, she'd sigh. We would have been perfect together. What really bothered me was how Jennifer's stories about Chris evolved over time. Early in our relationship, he was just a great guy I dated in college. By our second year of marriage, he'd become the love of my life who got away. By year 3, he was practically a saint who could do no wrong. Chris never would have lost his job, she said after my layoff. He always had backup plans. He was so responsible. Chris understood the importance of financial security, she'd mentioned when I suggested we cut back on expenses. Chris always made me feel like a priority, she'd add during arguments about household responsibilities. I started to feel like I was competing with a ghost and losing. But here's the thing about Jennifer that I didn't fully understand until later. She had this pattern of romanticizing the past while being dissatisfied with the present. It wasn't just about Chris. She did it with everything. Her college days were the best years of her life. Her old apartment was so much cuter than our house. Her previous job was way better than Mercy General. Jennifer lived in a constant state of nostalgia for things that probably weren't as perfect as she remembered. But Chris? Chris was her ultimate what-if scenario. I tried to be understanding. Everyone has that one relationship they wonder about, right? But Jennifer's obsession with Christopher went beyond normal curiosity. She knew details about his current life that seemed oddly specific for someone she hadn't spoken to in years. I heard Chris finished his residency and is working at some prestigious hospital in California, she'd mentioned casually. How do you know that? I'd ask. Oh, Sarah told me. She keeps in touch with people from college. But when I asked Sarah about it at a party, she looked confused. Chris? I haven't heard anything about him in years. Why? That's when I started paying closer attention to Jennifer's social media habits. She spent hours on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, always scrolling, always searching. I noticed she'd quickly close her laptop or switch tabs when I walked into the room. One evening I saw her typing Christopher Mitchell into the Facebook search bar. When she noticed me watching, she quickly closed the browser. Just curious about old friends, she said, but her face was red. The truth was, Jennifer had been cyber-stalking Christopher for years. She knew where he worked, what he looked like now, details about his life that she could only know from obsessive online research. She'd created this elaborate fantasy about their past relationship and his current success. But the most disturbing part? Jennifer had started reaching out to him. It started innocently enough, a happy birthday message on Facebook 2 years ago. Then a congratulations on your graduation when he finished medical school. Gradually, the messages became more frequent and more personal. "I was just thinking about our college days," she'd write. "Remember that time we drove to Wisconsin for the weekend? Those were such good times." Christopher, to his credit, kept his responses polite but brief. "Thanks for the birthday wishes, Jennifer. I hope you're doing well." He never encouraged the conversation or reciprocated her nostalgia, but Jennifer interpreted his politeness as hidden interest. "He still cares," she'd tell herself. "He's just being professional because he's married now." Yes, Christopher was married. Had been for 2 years to a woman named Dr. Amanda Chen, a fellow physician he'd met during residency. They lived in San Francisco, where they both worked at UCSF Medical Center. They had a beautiful life together, one that Jennifer studied obsessively through social media. She knew Amanda's birthday, their anniversary date, where they went on vacation, what their apartment looked like. She'd screenshot photos from Amanda's Instagram and zoom in on details, looking for signs that Christopher wasn't truly happy. "She's pretty, but she's not really his type," Jennifer would say, showing me photos. "Chris always preferred blondes." Jennifer was blonde, Amanda was brunette. "They look happy to me," I'd reply, which always made Jennifer defensive. "People only post the good stuff on social media, Marcus. You don't know what their relationship is really like." The irony was lost on her. Jennifer was judging their marriage based on social media while complaining that social media wasn't real. But the most telling moment came 6 months ago during a particularly bad fight about money. Jennifer was angry that I'd suggested we skip her cousin's expensive wedding in Hawaii. "Chris would never make his wife miss family events," she snapped. "He understood the importance of keeping up appearances." "How do you know what Chris would do?" I asked, finally fed up. "You haven't talked to him in 5 years. Jennifer went quiet for a moment, then said something that chilled me to the bone. "Some people are worth staying connected to, Marcus. Some people represent the life you could have had." That's when I realized I wasn't just competing with a memory. I was competing with an active fantasy that Jennifer was nurturing every single day. The real trouble started escalating about 6 weeks before everything exploded. My unemployment benefits were running low, and despite sending out dozens of applications, I hadn't landed anything yet. The teaching market was brutal. Budget cuts everywhere, and experienced teachers were competing for entry-level positions. Jennifer's patience was wearing thin, and she wasn't hiding it anymore. "Marcus, you need to be more aggressive about this job search," she'd say every morning over coffee. "Have you thought about changing careers? Maybe something more financially stable?" "Like what?" I'd ask. "I don't know. Sales, real estate, something where you can actually make money?" The way she said, "actually make money," stung. Teaching had never made me rich, but I'd always been proud of my work. Now Jennifer was making me feel like my entire career choice had been a mistake. Things got worse when her hospital friends started asking questions. Jennifer worked with several nurses whose husbands were doctors, lawyers, or business executives. She'd come home from work increasingly frustrated after hearing about their lives. "Melissa's husband just bought her a new Lexus," she'd announce, dropping her purse dramatically on the kitchen counter. For no reason, just because he wanted to surprise her. "That's nice for them," I'd reply, not looking up from my laptop where I was job hunting. "Don't you want to surprise me with nice things, Marcus?" "Of course I do. When you find a job, it's always when with you. Never how, or what's your plan, or let me figure this out. Just when." These conversations became daily occurrences. Jennifer would come home with stories about her coworkers' successful husbands, and I'd feel smaller and smaller each time. But the real escalation started when Jennifer began working extra shifts. At first I thought she was being supportive, bringing in more money while I was unemployed. But her behavior during these extra shifts was strange. She'd get dressed up more than usual, wearing makeup and perfume for 12-hour hospital shifts. When I commented on it, she'd say, "I want to look professional. Image matters in healthcare." She'd also stay late for mandatory meetings or training sessions that seemed to happen awfully frequently. When I'd ask about them, she'd give vague answers. "Just boring administrative stuff," she'd say. "You wouldn't be interested." The most telling change was her phone behavior. Jennifer became absolutely glued to her device. She'd text during dinner, take calls in the bathroom, and sleep with her phone under her pillow. When I asked who she was talking to so much, she'd get defensive. "It's work stuff, Marcus. The hospital has a group chat for our unit." At 11 p.m., healthcare doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. Jennifer had never been secretive about her phone before. She used to show me funny memes from her coworkers or complain about hospital drama. Now everything was suddenly confidential or boring work stuff. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago during what should have been a romantic dinner. I'd managed to scrape together enough money to take Jennifer to Romano's, the Italian place where we'd had our first date. I thought maybe a nice evening out would help us reconnect and ease some of the tension. I was wrong. Halfway through dinner, Jennifer's phone buzzed. She immediately grabbed it and started typing a response. "Can you put that away?" I asked gently. "We're supposed to be having a date night." "It's important," she said, not looking up from the screen. "More important than us?" She finally looked at me, and there was something cold in her eyes. Marcus, some of us have responsibilities. Some of us have people depending on us. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Forget it. She put her phone face down on the table, but I could see her fingers twitching toward it every few minutes. The rest of dinner was awkward and tense. When we got home, Jennifer immediately disappeared into the bathroom with her phone. I could hear her talking quietly, but couldn't make out the words. That night, I lay awake thinking about how much our relationship had changed. The woman I'd married used to laugh at my jokes, support my dreams, and make me feel like I could conquer the world. Now she looked at me like I was a disappointment she was stuck with. The next morning, I tried to address it directly. Jennifer, I feel like we're growing apart. Can we talk about what's really going on? She was getting ready for work, applying makeup in the bathroom mirror. What do you mean? You seem distant, unhappy. Is it just the money situation, or is there something else? Jennifer stopped applying her mascara and looked at me in the mirror. For a moment, I thought she might actually open up and tell me what was bothering her. Instead, she said, Marcus, some people are just naturally ambitious. They want more out of life. They don't settle for mediocrity. Are you saying I'm mediocre? I'm saying some people know how to take charge of their lives and make things happen. Others just wait for things to happen to them. The implication was clear. I was a waiter, not a doer. I was passive, not ambitious. I was everything she didn't want in a husband. That afternoon, while Jennifer was at work, I did something I'd never done before. I looked through her laptop. I know it was wrong, but I was desperate to understand what was happening to my marriage. What I found made my blood run cold. Jennifer had been messaging Christopher on LinkedIn for months. Not just casual, how are you messages, but long, detailed conversations about their lives, their memories, their feelings. I think about our college days all the time, she'd written. We had something really special, didn't we? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed in Chicago, read another message. My life is so different now than I thought it would be, she'd sent just 2 weeks earlier. Do you ever think about alternate timelines? About the choices we made? Christopher's responses were polite, but increasingly uncomfortable. Jennifer, I'm married now, and I'm sure you are too. Maybe we should keep our conversations more general. But Jennifer persisted. I know we're both married, Chris. I'm just saying it's nice to talk to someone who understands me. Someone who knew me when I had bigger dreams. The most recent exchange was from 3 days ago. Jennifer, I saw your promotion announcement on the hospital website. Dr. Christopher Mitchell, Chief of Cardiology. I'm so proud of you. You always said you'd be running a department by 35. Christopher, thank you. I hope you're doing well in your career too. Jennifer, I'm still just a nurse. Still in the same small town. Still married to the same man who's content with mediocrity. Sometimes I feel like I'm wasting my life. Christopher, Jennifer, I think you should talk to your husband about these feelings, not me. I'm not comfortable with this conversation. Jennifer, you're right. I'm sorry. I just missed talking to someone who had ambition. Someone who understood that life could be bigger than this. After that, Christopher had stopped responding entirely. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling sick to my stomach. My wife had been emotionally cheating on me for months, pouring her heart out to her ex-boyfriend, while making me feel like a failure every single day. But the worst part wasn't the messages themselves. It was realizing that Jennifer had been comparing our entire marriage to a fantasy relationship that had ended 8 years ago. That night, when Jennifer came home from work, I almost confronted her about the messages. But something held me back. Maybe it was cowardice, or maybe it was the hope that she'd come to her senses and stop on her own. Either way, I decided to wait and see what would happen next. I wouldn't have to wait long. The explosion was coming, and when it hit, it would destroy everything we'd built together and finally show Jennifer who Christopher Mitchell really was. The morning everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Jennifer came downstairs, already dressed for work in her scrubs. But something was different about her energy. She seemed agitated, almost manic. I need to talk to you about something, she said, not making eye contact. My heart sank. After finding those LinkedIn messages, I'd been dreading this conversation for days. What about? We got the credit card statement yesterday, the one for our joint account. I relaxed slightly. Money problems I could handle. Okay, what about it? Marcus, we're maxed out, completely maxed out. We owe $8,000 and we can barely make the minimum payments. She was right, and I knew it. Between my unemployment and trying to maintain our lifestyle, we'd been living on credit for months. I know it's bad, but once you find work? Jennifer's voice was getting louder. Marcus, it's been 3 months. 3 months of you sitting around this house, sending out applications and getting nowhere. I'm trying, Jennifer. The job market is fine for people who actually have skills employers want. That stung, but I tried to stay calm. What do you want me to do? I can't force someone to hire me. You could try harder. You could network. You could take a job that's beneath your precious teaching degree instead of holding out for the perfect position. I've applied for other jobs too. You know that. Have you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're perfectly content to let me carry this entire household while you play video games and feel sorry for yourself. That wasn't fair, and she knew it. I'd been applying for jobs every day, following up on leads, even considering positions outside education. But Jennifer was beyond rational discussion. You know what your problem is, Marcus? She continued, pacing around the kitchen like a caged animal. You have no ambition, no drive. You're content to be mediocre your entire life. That's not true. It is true. You've been teaching high school for 8 years, making the same salary in the same classroom with the same routine. You never wanted more. I love teaching. Love doesn't pay the bills, she screamed. Love doesn't get us out of debt. Love doesn't buy me the life I deserve. The life she deserved. There it was, the real issue. Jennifer felt entitled to a lifestyle that my income couldn't provide, and she resented me for it. What kind of life do you think you deserve, Jennifer? I asked quietly. A better one than this. She gestured around our modest kitchen. I deserve a husband who can provide for me, who can take me on vacations and buy me nice things and make me proud to introduce him to people. I'm sorry I'm such an embarrassment to you. You want to know what's embarrassing? Jennifer's eyes were blazing now. Having to tell my coworkers that my husband is unemployed, having to make excuses for why we can't afford to go out with them, having to watch other women get treated like queens while I'm stuck with someone who can't even keep a job. I didn't choose to get laid off, but you chose to be a teacher. You chose a career with no growth potential. You chose to be satisfied with less. I felt something snap inside me. 3 months of her criticism, her comparisons, her obvious disappointment in me, it all came flooding out. And you chose to marry me, I shouted back. You knew exactly who I was when you said yes. If you wanted someone different, you should have married someone different. Maybe I should have. The words hung in the air between us like a bomb that had just gone off. Jennifer's face was flushed, her chest heaving with anger and adrenaline. Maybe you should have what? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Maybe I should have married someone who actually had potential, someone who wasn't content to be ordinary. Someone like who, Jennifer? She hesitated for just a moment, but I could see the name on her lips before she said it. Someone like Christopher. There it was. Finally, after 3 years of hints and comparisons and passive-aggressive comments, she'd said it out loud. Christopher would never let this happen, she continued, the floodgates now completely open. Christopher had plans. He had ambition. He knew how to take care of a woman. Christopher broke up with you 8 years ago because of circumstances, not because he didn't love me. We were perfect together. If you were so perfect together, why didn't you fight for him? Why didn't you follow him to California? Because I was young and stupid. I thought there would be other opportunities. I thought I could find someone just as good. The implication was crystal clear. She'd settled for me, because she couldn't have him. Well, you were wrong, weren't you? I said bitterly. Yes, I was wrong. Jennifer was crying now, but her voice was still full of rage. I was wrong to think you could ever be half the man Christopher is. He's a doctor now, Marcus. A successful, respected doctor who can actually provide for his family. How do you know what Christopher is now? Jennifer froze. She realized she'd revealed too much. I heard from college friends. Bullshit. You've been stalking him online, haven't you? You've been messaging him. I have not been stalking. I saw the LinkedIn messages, Jennifer. Her face went white. You went through my computer? You've been emotionally cheating on me for months, telling your ex-boyfriend how unhappy you are, how much you regret marrying me. Those conversations were private. Nothing is private when you're married. We're supposed to be a team, but you've been undermining me while fantasizing about your ex? At least Christopher understood what it meant to be a man, Jennifer screamed, completely losing control now. At least he had goals and ambition and the ability to make something of himself. Christopher doesn't even respond to your messages anymore. He's married and wants nothing to do with you. That's not true. It is true. He told you to talk to your husband instead of him. He's uncomfortable with your obsession. I'm not obsessed. You're completely obsessed. You know more about his life than his own wife does. You've been living in a fantasy for 8 years. Jennifer was sobbing now, but her anger hadn't diminished. You want to know the truth, Marcus? The truth is that every day I wake up and wonder what my life would have been like if I'd married Christopher instead. Every day I look at you and think about what I gave up. Then why don't you call him? I said, my voice deadly calm. Why don't you call Christopher right now and tell him how you feel? What? You heard me. Call him. Tell him you made a mistake. Tell him you want him back. I can't just... Why not? You've been messaging him for months. You've been telling him how unhappy you are, so make the call. Jennifer stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Marcus, I can't just call someone and... You wish you'd married Chris instead? At least he's a real man. I repeated her words back to her. Those were your exact words, weren't they? So prove it. Call him. You're being ridiculous. I'm being realistic. You want Christopher? Go get him. I won't stand in your way. Jennifer's hands were shaking. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. In fact, I'll make it easy for you. I pulled out my phone and looked up Christopher's number from her LinkedIn messages. Then I dialed it and put the phone on speaker. Marcus, don't... Too late. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Christopher's voice came through the speaker, confused and slightly annoyed. Jennifer's face had gone completely white. She was staring at the phone like it was a snake about to bite her. Hi, Christopher, I said calmly. This is Marcus, Jennifer's husband. I have her here with me, and she has something she'd like to tell you. What? Who is this? Jennifer's husband. She's been messaging you on LinkedIn, telling you how unhappy she is in our marriage. She just told me she wishes she'd married you instead because you're a real man and I'm not. So I thought she should tell you directly. There was a long pause. Is this some kind of joke? No joke. Jennifer, go ahead. Tell Christopher how you feel. Jennifer was frozen, staring at the phone with terror in her eyes. Jennifer! Christopher's voice was getting more uncomfortable. Are you there? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Actually, Christopher, I continued, before she says anything, I think you should know that Jennifer has been researching your life obsessively for years. She knows where you work and where you live. Details about your wife. She's been living in a fantasy about your college relationship. What the hell is going on? Christopher's voice was sharp now. Jennifer, is this true? Jennifer finally found her voice. Chris, I've been thinking about us lately and... Stop. Christopher's voice was ice cold. Just stop right there. The line went quiet, except for Jennifer's ragged breathing. Jennifer, Christopher continued, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What you're describing sounds like stalking. I'm married, happily married. I have been for 3 years. I haven't thought about our college relationship in years, and I certainly haven't been encouraging whatever fantasy you've created. Jennifer started crying harder. Furthermore, Christopher continued, if you continue to contact me or research my personal life, I will be filing a restraining order. Do you understand me? But Chris, do you understand me? Yes, Jennifer whispered. Good. And Marcus, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. You should know that I've been trying to discourage her messages for months. I never responded with anything that could be interpreted as romantic interest. I figured as much, I said. Jennifer, get help. This behavior isn't normal or healthy. Don't contact me again. The line went dead. Jennifer collapsed onto the kitchen floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Her fantasy had just been destroyed in the most brutal way possible, but I wasn't done yet. The silence after Christopher hung up was deafening. Jennifer sat on our kitchen floor, sobbing like her world had just ended, which, in a way, it had. 8 years of fantasy had been obliterated in a 4-minute phone call. I stood there watching my wife fall apart, and for the first time in months, I felt completely calm. The truth was finally out in the open. No more pretending, no more walking on eggshells, no more competing with a ghost. Jennifer, I said quietly, we need to talk. She looked up at me through her tears, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant every word you said. And honestly, I'm glad you finally said it. What? I sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly feeling exhausted. For 3 years, I've been trying to figure out what was wrong with our marriage. Why you seemed so unhappy. Why nothing I did was ever good enough. Why you always seemed to be comparing me to someone else. Now I know. Jennifer wiped her nose with the back of her hand. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You never got over Christopher. You married me as a consolation prize, hoping I'd somehow transform into him. When that didn't happen, you spent our entire marriage resenting me for not being someone else. That's not true. Jennifer, you just told me you wake up every day wondering what your life would have been like if you'd married him instead. How is that not true? She had no answer for that. The worst part, I continued, is that you've been lying to yourself about who Christopher actually is. You've built him up into this perfect man based on a college relationship from 8 years ago. You don't know anything about the real Christopher. I know enough. You know nothing. You know what he posts on social media and what you can find through internet searches. You've been stalking a stranger and calling it love. Jennifer's phone buzzed. She looked at it, and her face went even whiter, if that was possible. What is it? I asked. It's a message from Christopher's wife. What does it say? Jennifer's hands were shaking as she read. She says Christopher told her about the call. She wants me to know that they've been dealing with my inappropriate contact for over a year. She's asking me to please leave them alone so they can enjoy their marriage in peace. I almost felt sorry for Jennifer in that moment. Almost. There's more, Jennifer whispered. She says Christopher showed her all my LinkedIn messages months ago. They'd been laughing about my pathetic obsession with their friends. And there it was, the final humiliation. Not only had Christopher rejected her, but he and his wife had been treating her like a joke. The great love story Jennifer had been nurturing in her mind was nothing more than an amusing anecdote to them. "Jennifer," I said gently, "I want you to really think about what just happened. You threw away our marriage for a man who doesn't want you, doesn't think about you, and considers you a nuisance. Was it worth it?" She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "What happens now? Now you need to decide what you want. Do you want to try to save our marriage, or do you want to keep chasing fantasies?" "I want to save our marriage," she said quickly. "Marcus, I love you. I know I haven't acted like it, but I do love you." "Do you? Or do you love the security I provide? Because there's a difference." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. I'm so confused." At least she was being honest. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to call in sick to work today. Then you're going to pack a bag and go stay with your sister for a week. We both need time to think about whether this marriage is salvageable." "Marcus, please don't make me leave." "I'm not making you do anything. I'm giving you space to figure out what you actually want. Because right now, I don't think you know." Jennifer nodded slowly. "What about you? What are you going to do?" "I'm going to think about whether I want to be married to someone who sees me as a disappointment, someone who's been emotionally cheating on me while making me feel like a failure every single day." "I never meant to make you feel like a failure, but you did. For months, you've been tearing me down while building up a fantasy man who doesn't exist. Do you have any idea what that does to someone's self-esteem?" Jennifer started crying again. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I really am. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo 3 years of damage." She went upstairs to pack, and I sat alone in the kitchen, processing everything that had just happened. My marriage was probably over, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. An hour later, Jennifer came back downstairs with a suitcase. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Marcus," she said, "I know I don't deserve to ask this, but do you think there's any chance we can work through this?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and tried to find the woman I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. She was still there, somewhere underneath all the resentment and fantasy and disappointment. But I wasn't sure if that was enough anymore. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I really don't know." Jennifer nodded and headed toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. "For what it's worth," she said without turning around, "you are a good man, Marcus. You deserve better than what I've given you." "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." After she left, I sat in the silence of our empty house and realized something profound. I was relieved. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about disappointing someone or living up to impossible standards or competing with a ghost. I was free to figure out who I really was without Jennifer's constant criticism echoing in my head. And that felt like the beginning of something new. That first night alone in the house was strange. I kept expecting to hear Jennifer's key in the door, or her voice calling from the kitchen, or the sound of her phone buzzing with another work message. Instead, there was just silence. And for the first time in months, it was peaceful silence. I spent the evening thinking about how we'd gotten to this point. When did our marriage stop being about love and start being about scorekeeping? When did I become the villain in Jennifer's story instead of her partner? The truth is, I'd seen the red flags early on, but I'd chosen to ignore them. Love makes you optimistic, doesn't it? You think you can overcome anything if you just try hard enough. But some problems can't be solved with effort. They require honesty, and Jennifer had been lying to herself for years. The biggest lesson I learned was about the difference between loving someone and loving the idea of someone. Jennifer had fallen in love with the idea of Christopher, the successful doctor, the provider, the man who could give her the lifestyle she wanted. But she'd never actually known the real Christopher, just like she'd never really seen the real me. I realized I'd been doing something similar, in a way. I'd been in love with the idea of Jennifer, the confident, ambitious woman who'd chosen me. I'd ignored the signs that she was constantly looking for something better, something more. I'd convinced myself that her dissatisfaction was temporary, that if I just worked harder or made more money or became more successful, she'd finally be happy with me. But here's what I learned. You can't make someone love you by changing yourself. You can't compete with a fantasy, because fantasies are perfect and real life never is. And you definitely can't build a healthy relationship with someone who sees you as a consolation prize. The Christopher situation taught me something else important: the danger of social media obsession. Jennifer had spent years curating a false narrative about her ex-boyfriend based on carefully selected posts and professional updates. She'd convinced herself that his life was perfect, that their relationship had been perfect, that he was the answer to all her problems. But real relationships aren't Instagram posts. They're about dealing with everyday problems together, supporting each other through difficult times, and choosing to love someone even when they're not at their best. Jennifer had romanticized her past with Christopher while taking our present for granted. I also realized how much damage her constant criticism had done to my self-confidence. For months, I'd internalized her disappointment and started believing that maybe I really was a failure. Maybe I really was mediocre. Maybe I really didn't deserve love or respect. But sitting alone in that quiet house, I remembered who I was before Jennifer's voice became the loudest one in my head. I was a good teacher who'd impacted hundreds of students' lives. I was a loyal friend, a devoted husband, a man with integrity and kindness. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't the disappointment Jennifer had made me feel like either. The unemployment situation had been a catalyst, but it wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that Jennifer had never fully committed to our marriage. Part of her had always been looking backward, wondering, what if, instead of focusing on what we could build together. I thought about all the times I'd tried to compete with Christopher's memory, working extra jobs to make more money, suggesting expensive dates I couldn't afford, trying to be more ambitious or successful or impressive. But I'd been fighting a losing battle because I was competing with a fantasy, not a real person. The phone call had been brutal, but it was also liberating. It forced Jennifer to confront the reality of her obsession and showed her that the perfect life she'd been imagining didn't exist. Christopher wasn't pining for her. He was happily married and wanted nothing to do with her. Her fantasy had been completely one-sided. But the most important lesson was about self-respect. I'd spent 3 years accepting treatment that no one should accept in a marriage. I'd let Jennifer make me feel small, inadequate, and unworthy of love. I'd enabled her fantasy by not confronting it directly, hoping it would just go away on its own. The truth is, I should have had that conversation years ago. I should have demanded honesty about her feelings for Christopher. I should have insisted on couples therapy when the comparison started. I should have set boundaries about what kind of treatment I was willing to accept. Instead, I'd tried to love her through it, hoping that my patience and understanding would eventually win her over. But you can't love someone into loving you back. You can't sacrifice your self-respect to save a relationship that the other person isn't fully invested in. As I sat there in the quiet house, I realized that regardless of what happened with Jennifer, I'd learned something valuable about myself. I deserved better. I deserved a partner who chose me every day, not someone who saw me as a backup plan. And for the first time in years, I was ready to demand that kind of love or walk away from anything less. 3 weeks have passed since that explosive morning in our kitchen, and I'm writing this from my new apartment across town. Yes, you read that right. I moved out. Let me tell you how everything unfolded. Jennifer stayed at her sister's for exactly 4 days before she started calling. Not to apologize or discuss our marriage, but to ask when she could come home. "I've learned my lesson," she kept saying. "I'm ready to focus on us now." But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you perfect clarity about what you will and won't accept. I told Jennifer we needed to have an honest conversation before she came back. She agreed, probably thinking it would be easy to smooth things over. When we met at a neutral coffee shop, I laid out my conditions. Complete transparency with her phone and social media, deletion of all Christopher's contact information, couples therapy, and a genuine apology that acknowledged the damage she'd done to our marriage. Jennifer's response? "Don't you think you're being a little dramatic, Marcus? I made a mistake, but everyone has fantasies about their exes. It doesn't mean anything." That's when I knew our marriage was truly over. She still didn't understand what she'd done wrong. In her mind, she'd just gotten caught having innocent thoughts about an old boyfriend. She couldn't see the years of emotional abuse, the constant comparisons, the way she'd systematically destroyed my self-confidence while nurturing an obsession with another man. "Jennifer," I said calmly, "you didn't just have fantasies. You actively pursued your ex-boyfriend while making me feel like a failure every single day. You emotionally checked out of our marriage years ago." "That's not true." "It is true. And the fact that you can't admit it tells me everything I need to know about whether this marriage can be saved." I filed for divorce the next day. Jennifer's reaction was predictable. First came anger. How dare I give up on our marriage over one little fight? Then came bargaining. She'd do anything to save us. She'd change. She'd go to therapy. When that didn't work, she tried guilt. I was abandoning her when she needed me most. I was being cruel and unforgiving. But I'd learned something important about myself during those quiet days alone. I liked who I was when I wasn't constantly being criticized. I was funnier, more confident, more optimistic about the future. I'd forgotten what it felt like to not walk on eggshells in my own home. The divorce process was surprisingly smooth. Jennifer tried to claim she deserved alimony because she'd supported me during my unemployment, but her lawyer quickly explained that 3 months of unemployment didn't constitute grounds for spousal support. We split our minimal assets, paid off our joint debts, and went our separate ways. Best part? 2 weeks after I moved out, I got a job offer, not teaching, something better. A local tech company needed someone to develop educational software, and my teaching background made me the perfect candidate. The salary was nearly double what I'd made as a teacher. Jennifer heard about the job through mutual friends and actually had the audacity to call me. "Marcus, this is wonderful news. Maybe we should reconsider the divorce. We could really make it work now that you have a good job." I laughed at the irony. "Jennifer, you left me when I was unemployed and struggling. You don't get to come back now that I'm successful." "But I never left you. You left me emotionally years ago. The physical separation was just making it official. As for Christopher, well, this is where the story gets really interesting. Remember how he'd threatened a restraining order if Jennifer contacted him again? Apparently, she didn't take that seriously. 2 weeks after our divorce was finalized, Jennifer sent Christopher a Facebook message saying she was finally free and ready to explore what could have been. She included photos of herself and a long letter about how she'd made a mistake marrying the wrong man. Christopher's response was swift and decisive. He filed for a restraining order and sent screenshots of Jennifer's message to her employer. Turns out, obsessively contacting someone after they've explicitly told you to stop is considered harassment, and Mercy General Hospital has strict policies about employees engaging in stalking behavior. Jennifer was fired last week. I found out through her sister, who called to ask if I knew Jennifer was going through a rough patch. When I heard the whole story, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, just a kind of detached sadness for someone who destroyed her own life chasing a fantasy. Today, I'm sitting in my new apartment, which is smaller than the house Jennifer and I shared, but feels infinitely more peaceful. I've got a job I love, friends who actually enjoy my company, and for the first time in years, I'm excited about the future. Last weekend, I went on a coffee date with Sarah, a fellow software developer I met at work. When she asked about my divorce, I gave her the honest version, that my ex-wife was obsessed with her ex-boyfriend and made me feel inadequate for years. Sarah's response? Well, her loss is my gain. You seem pretty amazing to me. And you know what? I'm starting to believe that might be true. To anyone out there dealing with a partner who makes you feel like you're not enough, you are enough. You deserve someone who chooses you every day, not someone who sees you as a placeholder while they chase impossible dreams. Sometimes, the best thing that can happen to your marriage is realizing it needs to end. Trust me on this one.